Today, for a few minutes, I'm going to talk about the Constitution and how it was structured that led to what we call the first American party system. What we mean by that is we're talking about the first two American political parties. So as we remember from last week, the Constitution set up a federal system of government. And in the federal system of the U.S. Constitution, the national government has more power than the individual states. Article 6 of the Constitution contains what's called the Supremacy Clause that states essentially when there's a conflict between the state laws and national laws, those of the national laws are supreme. So in essence, what that means is the Supremacy Clause states that the national government is superior to the state governments. In other words, state governments cannot pass laws, they cannot enact policies that violate the laws of the national government or violate the Constitution. Now, when the Constitution first went into practice, remember it was ratified in the summer of 1788 and was put into practice in 1789. As the government started practicing under the Constitution, George Washington was president, the first Congress under the Constitution convened, and they started making national laws, and those laws were debated from two essential viewpoints. So the opposing views, first off, one group that wanted a stronger, more powerful national government, they were called Federalists. So we're not talking about the Federalists who favored ratification of the Constitution. We're talking about the first American political party, the Federalists. And make sure you understand that the Federalists, they favored the power of the national government over the state governments, and they believed that the Constitution and the acts of Congress should make that certain, more powerful national government. On the other side were Republicans. Not the same Republicans as we have today in our current party system, but the Republicans were sometimes referred to as Jeffersonians or Jeffersonian Republicans because they favored a smaller national government, a national government with less power, because they believed that the states, the individual states, should have a lot of freedom to operate as they see fit under the Constitution. So the first two political parties were the Federalists and the Republicans. Now this started right away in the first administration of George Washington. Alexander Hamilton was part of the presidential cabinet. In other words, George Washington's group of advisors. The advisors to the president are the cabinet. Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury. His responsibility was coordinating, developing, recommending policies that would help the national government prosper economically, financially. So as Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton, his job was to make the government strong economically, and he favored a powerful national government. On the other side, as the Republican representative, the leader of the Republicans, the Jeffersonian Republicans, was Thomas Jefferson. He was the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State's responsibility is to conduct relations with foreign countries, in other words, foreign policy. Jefferson was firm in his belief that the national government was made stronger than the national government under the Articles of Confederation, but the national government should be less powerful than the Federalists wanted. Jefferson favored state government authority over the national government. Jefferson tended to side with what you would consider the more ordinary people, farmers, small business people. Hamilton sided more with the wealthier, bigger business, banking people of the United States. So Hamilton thought that those with more wealth should have more power under the federal government, and the federal government should work to help them develop the economy of the United States. Jefferson believed that small farmers, small business people, should be as free as possible to do what they knew was best at the local level. That's why Jefferson favored states. Now, Hamilton's first job as the Secretary of the Treasury was to develop a financial plan for the United States. And he had 5 pieces to this plan. Every one of them was designed to make the national government stronger. First off was a Bank of the United States. Under Hamilton's plan, the United States government would receive money from tariffs, would receive money from excise taxes. That money would go into the Bank of the United States. The Bank of the United States would then have money to pay the national debt. They would also have money that they could loan to businesses so they could develop bigger, stronger, more profitable businesses. Second part of the plan was another way to raise money. Excise taxes, in this case on whiskey, where each gallon of whiskey would be taxed at a certain level. That money would go to the Bank of the United States. Third part of the plan was funding at par. Now this is a little more complicated. During the Revolution, the Second Continental Congress and the Congress of the Articles of Confederation, they had to borrow money to wage war against Britain. And they did that with bonds. If we look at this picture here, this is a $3 bond. Americans could purchase a $3 bond for less than $3, maybe $2. And then in a certain period of time, they would turn that bond in. They would take this piece of paper, turn it into a bank, and the bank would give them $3 back. Now, after the Revolution, the national government didn't have a lot of money. They were in debt. And people were saying we should let that maybe not pay full $3 on a $3 bond, but when people turn it in, maybe give them $2.25, or give them $2, give them what they invested in. So not fund it at what it said. Funding at par was Hamilton's proposal to make sure that the government paid back every penny that it borrowed, because that would raise the credit of the national government, meaning next time the government needed money, people would be willing to buy bonds, which are loans to the government, and know that they were going to be paid back on those bonds in full. The fourth part of the plan was for the national government to assume state debts. If we look at the column here on the left, or the columns, for example, we have these various states. 1789 is when the national government began practicing under the Constitution. Each state had a bunch of debt left over from the Revolutionary War. The idea was the national government would take the state debts and pay them back to whoever the money was owed to. Hamilton did this for a reason, which was to make people look to the national government as the strong financial authority rather than the state governments. So somebody from Connecticut who was owed money from buying a bond during the Revolutionary War from the Connecticut government wanted to be paid back, he would want to make sure that the Connecticut government stayed strong. But if the United States government, the national government, took that debt and they were the ones paying the debt back, then that person from Connecticut would start thinking about the national government as the center of economic activity rather than the state government. So this was another way to bring the support for the national government away from the states. The final thing was tariffs. Hamilton believed in a protective tariff. So we know already, or we should know already, that tariffs are a tax on imports. So if we look at British cloth over here that's coming to the United States, and it costs $4 a roll, the United States would put a tax on it called a tariff. And if we put the 25% tariff on British products, in this case cloth, that cloth would cost $5 a roll in the United States. But cloth that was made in the United States, say it was $4 a roll also, it's not taxed because it's already here. So a tariff, a tax on imports, could be used to protect American cloth makers or American manufacturers. Hamilton believed that the United States should develop its economic strength by increasing manufacturing, like other powerful nations in the world, Britain, for example, France, for example. And he believed that this protective tariff would allow American businesses to grow. The tariff money would go into the national bank, and the national bank would be able to loan that money to businesses who wanted to expand and hire more workers and make more cloth and make more money and make the American economy stronger. Now, this all happened during George Washington's administration. Washington was essentially a federalist. He favored a strong national government. He sided with Alexander Hamilton in urging Congress to pass Hamilton's financial plan. Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, rejected that because he believed it was taking too much power away from the states and putting it in the hands of the national government, and he was opposed to that. So our first two American parties developed in response to Alexander Hamilton's financial plan, and these two parties existed, Federalists against Republicans, until halfway through the War of 1812, so from 1789 to about 1815.